I was 23 when my life quietly changed. Not with noise, not with drama, but with a look. I met him on an ordinary evening, one of those days where nothing feels special and yet everything is heavy. I was tired of my own thoughts, tired of being told who I should be, tired of living a life that didn't feel like it belonged to me. He noticed me before I noticed him. I felt it first, that strange warmth on my skin, like someone had been watching me not with hunger, but with understanding. When I looked up, our eyes met, and for a second, the world slowed down. He was older, much older, silver in his hair, calm in his posture, a face that carried stories instead of impatience. He smiled, not flirtatious, not demanding, just kind. "Are you waiting for someone?" he asked. I shook my head. "No." "Then sit," he said gently. "You look like someone who needs company." I should have said no. I didn't. We talked about small things, about nothing, about everything. Time passed without asking permission. He didn't treat me like a boy. He didn't try to impress me. He listened, really listened. When I stood up to leave, I realized something that scared me. I didn't want to go. That night, I kept thinking about him. His voice, his calm, the way he made silence feel safe. I told myself it was nothing, just curiosity, just respect. But the heart knows before the mind admits. Days later, we met again. Then again, slowly, carefully, like two people afraid to name what was growing between them. He paid for dinners without making it feel like control. He asked about my dreams without judging them. He remembered things I forgot I had said. My family noticed a change in me. "You're different," my mother said. "Who are you seeing?" my brother asked. I lied. Because how do you explain a love that hasn't even spoken its name yet? When he finally told me his age, I froze. "This is wrong," I whispered. He nodded. Then we stopped. But neither of us moved. And in that silence, I realized the truth. I wasn't just attracted to him. I was already in love. Not because he spent money on me. Not because he gave me comfort. But because for the first time in my life, someone saw me and stayed. I told myself I would keep my distance. That was a lie I repeated every morning. While getting dressed, while tying my shoes, while pretending my heart wasn't already walking toward him without asking me first. But distance is difficult when someone feels like calm. We began meeting more often. Not planned meetings, natural ones. Coffee that turned into dinner. Walks that stretched into long evenings. Sometimes we spoke endlessly. Sometimes we just sat in silence. And somehow that silence felt fuller than words. He never rushed me. That was the most dangerous thing about him. Most people wanted something from me. Attention, obedience, answers. He wanted only presence. He would look at me as if time itself had paused just to allow us that moment. "You don't talk much about yourself," he said one evening. I shrugged. "No one really listens." He smiled softly. "I am listening now." And I believed him. Slowly, I started sharing things I had never said aloud. My fears, my confusion, the pressure my family put on me, the loneliness I carried even when surrounded by people. He never judged, never interrupted, never told me I was wrong for feeling what I felt. Instead, he said things like, "You're allowed to choose your own happiness. You don't owe your life to anyone else." Those words stayed with me long after I went home. I noticed how careful he was with me, how he respected my space, even when closeness hovered between us like an unspoken question. Sometimes his hand would rest near mine, not touching, just close enough to feel the warmth. And that was enough to make my heart race. One night, while walking beside him, I asked quietly, "Why are you so kind to me?" He stopped walking. "Because you matter," he said simply. "And because I know what it feels like to be alone." Something shifted inside me then. I began going to his place, not as an escape, but as a return. His home felt peaceful, safe, like a place where I didn't have to pretend. We shared meals, watched old films, talked late into the night. Sometimes I stayed over. Nothing happened that crossed a line, but everything felt intimate. Waking up there felt different. Soft light through the curtains, the smell of coffee, the quiet presence of someone who cared whether I was okay. My family started asking questions again. "You're never home," my mother said. Who is he? My brother demanded. I stayed silent, because how could I explain that I had found something rare, something fragile, something that the world wouldn't understand? I knew the truth, even if I was afraid to say it. I wasn't just drawn to him anymore. I depended on him. And somewhere deep inside, I sensed that once this love crossed a certain line, there would be no turning back. I tried not to think about his age. At first, it was easy. When we were together, it didn't matter. He laughed like someone young at heart, listened like someone wise, and cared like someone who had nothing to prove. But the world has a way of reminding you of things you want to forget. One afternoon, while we were sitting across from each other, sunlight falling softly on his face, I noticed the lines near his eyes. Not flaws, stories. Years of living, loving, losing. And suddenly, fear crept in. "You're thinking too much again," he said, noticing my silence. I looked at him. People would talk. He nodded slowly. "They always do." "You've lived so much life," I whispered, "and I'm just starting." He didn't deny it. That's what hurt the most. "Yes," he said gently, "there's an age between us. I won't pretend it doesn't exist." My chest tightened. "Then why are we doing this?" He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his voice calm but heavy with honesty. "Because love doesn't arrive asking for documents," he said. "It comes when it wants, to whom it wants." I looked away, tears burning my eyes. "I'm scared." "So am I," he admitted. That surprised me. "You?" I asked. "I'm scared of hurting you," he said. "Of being the reason you lose your family. Of loving you in a world that won't be kind to us." That was the moment I realized something important. This wasn't one-sided. This wasn't convenience. This wasn't control. This was care. That night, I stayed longer than usual. We sat close, closer than before. Our shoulders touched. My head rested briefly against his arm, and neither of us moved away. My heart was loud. "I don't want this to be a mistake," I whispered. He turned to me, his voice steady. Then we moved slowly, with honesty, with respect. I nodded, but inside, I knew I was already falling too deep to move slowly. At home, the tension grew. My family noticed my distance, my secrecy, my refusal to explain. "This isn't right." My mother said one evening, "You're hiding something." I wanted to scream that I had finally found peace, that someone finally chose me, not for who I should be, but for who I was. Instead, I stayed silent, because I knew what would happen if I spoke his name. When I went back to him, I held on to him a little longer. I listened to his heartbeat when we sat side by side. I memorized the way he said my name, like it meant something sacred. The age between us didn't disappear, but neither did the love. And slowly, dangerously, I began to understand. If the world asked me to choose, I wasn't sure I could walk away from him anymore. It didn't feel like rebellion. It felt like survival. They began watching me closely. My phone, my movements, the way I dressed, the way I smiled for no reason. Love has a way of changing you, and they noticed a change before I was ready to explain it. "You're not the same anymore," my mother said one night. "Who has filled your head with these ideas?" I lowered my eyes. No one. But that wasn't true. He had filled my heart. One evening, my brother followed me. I didn't notice at first. When I reached his house and saw him standing there, waiting for me with that calm smile, my heart settled until I turned around. My brother was watching from across the street. The confrontation at home was loud, angry, full of fear disguised as authority. "He's too old for you," they said. "This isn't love," they said. "You're being influenced," they said. No one asked how I felt. I tried to explain about the respect, the care, the way he never forced anything, never rushed me, never made me feel small. But they had already decided. "You will not see him again." Those words echoed in my head for days. I stopped answering his messages, stopped going to his place, stopped being myself. But love doesn't disappear just because it's forbidden. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. Everything felt hollow. My chest ached like something vital had been taken from me. Finally, I went to see him. When he opened the door and saw me, his expression softened, and then darkened with worry. "They know," I whispered. He didn't ask how. Didn't ask what they said. He just pulled me into a quiet embrace, gentle, protective, grounding. "You don't have to choose me," he said after a long silence. "I don't want to be the reason you lose your family." I looked up at him, tears in my eyes. "And I don't want to lose you." That was the first time we admitted it out loud. Love. From that day, things changed. Not in passion, but in weight. Every meeting felt stolen. Every goodbye felt heavier. Every touch carried the fear of it being the last. Still, he never asked me to run away. Never promised fantasies. He only gave me what he always had. Honesty. "If you stay," he said one night, "stay because you want to, not because you feel trapped." I stayed. Not because I was young. Not because he had money. Not because I was confused. But because when I was with him, I felt whole. And even though the world stood against us, I knew one truth with painful clarity. Some loves are worth the fight, even when the fight is against everyone you know. I didn't move into his world all at once. It happened quietly. A night that turned into morning. A morning that asked me to stay for breakfast. A spare toothbrush. A change of clothes that slowly became my clothes. His home began to recognize me. I learned the sound of the place. The soft creak of the floor in the early hours. The way he hummed while making tea. The silence that never felt empty when we shared it. I started waking up beside him, not in a way that needed explanation, but in a way that felt natural. We slept peacefully, like two people who trusted each other enough to rest without fear. Every morning, he would look at me with the same quiet care. "Did you sleep well? Are you hungry? Do you feel okay today?" No one had ever asked me these questions with such consistency. Sometimes we sat together without speaking. Sometimes we talked for hours. He told me about his past, about love he had lost, about mistakes, about how he never expected to feel something this intense again. "I thought that part of my life was over," he admitted once. "Then you walked in." I felt both powerful and fragile hearing that. I knew what people would say if they saw us, what assumptions they would make. But inside his walls, there was no judgment, only care. He supported me in ways that went beyond money. Yes, he helped me when I needed it, but never to control me, never to own me. He did it because he wanted my life to be easier, lighter. And I let him, not because I was weak, but because I trusted him. Sometimes I would sit beside him, my head resting against his shoulder, listening to his breathing. In those moments, the world outside disappeared. My family barely saw me anymore. "You're choosing him over us," my mother said during one painful phone call. I didn't answer, because the truth was more complicated than that. I wasn't choosing against them. I was choosing myself. With him, I felt seen, valued, safe. I didn't have to perform or explain. I could just be. One night, while lying awake, I asked him softly, "What if this ends badly?" He turned toward me. "Then we'll know we were honest." His hand rested near mine, not claiming, not demanding, just present. "That's all love ever asks," he said. Honesty. I closed my eyes, letting the weight of that settle in. By then, I knew the truth I had been avoiding. His world was no longer separate from mine. His life had woven itself into my days, my nights, my sense of belonging. And I was no longer just visiting. I had arrived. By the time I realized I no longer needed permission to love him, I had already crossed every invisible line the world had drawn for me. We existed quietly. No public declarations. No explanations to strangers. Just two lives moving together in a rhythm that felt honest. But even quiet love carries weight. People stared when we went out together. Their eyes lingered a second too long. Their curiosity sharpened by judgment. I learned to ignore it, but sometimes it hurt him more than he let on. "Does it bother you?" I asked once. He paused before answering. "Not for myself," he said. "For you." That answer stayed with me. I began to notice how protective he was. Not possessive, never controlling, but aware. He paid attention to my moods, my silences, the days when I felt overwhelmed by the pressure of living between two worlds. Some nights, I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, my chest tight with questions. What if I regret this? What if he leaves first? What if I'm wasting my youth? He never dismissed my fears. Instead, he listened. "You're not losing anything," he said one night. His voice calmed the darkness. "You're choosing something." I turned toward him. "And what if choosing you cost me everything else?" He met my gaze steadily. "Then I will never pretend it was easy for you." That honesty was his greatest gift and his greatest danger. I grew attached in ways I hadn't expected. His presence grounded me. His absence unsettled me. When he was gone for a few hours, I felt the time stretch unnaturally. I hated that feeling. I didn't want to need anyone, but I needed him. One evening, after a particularly harsh argument with my family, I arrived at his place shaking. He didn't ask questions. He wrapped me in a quiet embrace and let me breathe. In that moment, I realized something that scared me. He wasn't just my lover. He was my refuge. Later, as we sat together, he said softly, "Love should never erase who you are." I nodded, but inside, I wasn't sure anymore where I ended and where he began. This love existed without permission, without approval, without blessing, without protection from consequences. And yet, it was real. It was gentle. It was chosen every single day. I knew then that something would eventually have to break. Either the world would pull us apart, or this love would demand more courage than I knew I had. Love doesn't usually break all at once. It cracks slowly, through silence, through fear, through the things we don't say because we're afraid they'll change everything. The first crack appeared the day I realized how much power his absence had over me. He had to travel for a few days. Work, responsibilities, the kind of adult life I was still learning to understand. I told him I'd be fine. I told myself the same lie. The house felt different without him. Too quiet, too large. I checked my phone too often. Counted hours like they were days. When he called at night, hearing his voice made my chest ache instead of calm. "I miss you," I admitted, surprised by my own honesty. He was quiet for a moment. "I miss you too." That should have been comforting. Instead, it scared me. When he returned, I clung to him without realizing it, asking more questions, needing more reassurance, feeling restless when he focused on anything that wasn't me. He noticed. One evening, he took my hands gently, grounding me. "Talk to me," he said. "What's happening inside you?" I swallowed. "I'm afraid." "Of what?" "Of losing you," I whispered. "Of waking up one day and realizing I gave you too much of myself." He didn't pull away. He didn't defend himself. He said something that shook me. "I don't want to be your whole world." I looked up, hurt flashing across my face. "I want to be part of it," he continued softly. "But you deserve more than one center." The words felt like a wound and a gift at the same time. That night, emotions rose between us. Fear, longing, frustration, love, all tangled together. We stood close, breaths uneven, hearts loud. "I choose you," I said, my voice breaking, "even when I'm scared." He rested his forehead against mine. "Then choose yourself too." In that closeness, something shifted, not into urgency, but into trust. We didn't need to prove anything. We just needed to be honest. The breaking point wasn't an argument. It was the realization that love, this deep, demanded balance, or it would consume us both. And for the first time, I understood loving him meant growing, not disappearing. That night didn't arrive with drama. No storm outside. No raised voices. No desperate decisions. It arrived quietly, like most moments that change your life forever. We had spent the evening talking, the kind of conversation that circles around everything important without rushing to conclusions. The lights were low, the world outside distant and irrelevant. There was a heaviness in the air, not fear, but meaning. At some point, words stopped being necessary. We sat close, closer than usual. Not out of habit, but intention. I could feel his presence beside me. Steady, calm, grounding. "You don't owe me anything," he said softly, breaking the silence. "Not time, not devotion, not sacrifice." I turned to him. "I know." And I meant it. This wasn't about obligation anymore. It was about choice. That night, we didn't chase intensity. We chose tenderness. We stayed present, aware of each other's emotions, moving only as fast as trust allowed. It felt like a quiet promise, not spoken aloud, but understood. I rested my head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. It was slow, steady, real. For the first time, I didn't feel younger. For the first time, he didn't feel older. We just felt equal. In that closeness, something deep settled between us. Not passion, not fear, but certainty. That this love was no longer fragile. That it had survived doubt, distance, and judgment. That it deserved care. Not secrecy fueled by shame, but honesty fueled by respect. Before falling asleep, he whispered, "No matter what happens, remember this feeling." I closed my eyes, holding on to that warmth, because I knew, whatever the world tried to take from us later, this moment would remain untouched. Life has a way of testing the things you care about most. A few weeks after that quiet, transformative night, everything shifted. His work required him to be away longer than usual. My family's pressure mounted. Friends noticed my absences and whispered questions I couldn't answer. The weight of all of it pressed down on me, making every breath feel heavier. I tried to stay strong. I tried to tell myself that love this steady could survive distance, judgment, and fear. But when the phone rang with a delayed call from him, my chest tightened. My heart raced. What if this distance changed him? What if it changed me? When he finally returned, I saw it immediately. A subtle tension in his shoulders, a shadow in his eyes. "You've changed," he said quietly. "I'm scared," I admitted. "I feel like the world is pushing me away from you, and I don't know if I can hold on to this." He took my hands in his, steadying me. "And yet, here you are," he said softly. "Still standing, still choosing." Tears blurred my vision. "What if I can't?" He shook his head gently. "Then we'll face it together. We've survived so much already. Don't forget that." But the fear didn't go away immediately. The days that followed were tense. Arguments with my family grew sharper. Friends hinted and questioned. And through it all, I clung to him, not possessively, but desperately, needing reassurance that we weren't slipping away from each other. There was a night I almost didn't make it to him. My father confronted me on the street, furious, demanding that I return home. I hesitated. My heart screamed to run to him. My mind froze in fear. But somehow I did. I found him waiting at the same door I had walked into months ago. His calm presence enveloped me like a shield. "You're not lost," he whispered as I held on to him, shaking. "You're here, and that's all that matters." In that embrace, I realized something vital. Love isn't only about passion or happiness. It's about showing up when everything else tries to tear you apart. I had almost lost him. I had almost lost myself. But love, real, deep, steady love, doesn't let go that easily. And that night, I promised silently, I would fight for him. I would fight for us. I would survive everything to remain in his world. The world never stopped judging us. People whispered. My family remained disapproving. Friends asked questions I didn't want to answer. And yet, through all of it, he stayed. Steady, constant, patient. That morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee and the soft warmth of his arm around me. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, painting the room gold. I breathed in and realized something. I was home. Home wasn't a building. Home wasn't a place. Home was him. I looked at him, and he looked back with the same quiet understanding that had drawn me to him months ago. No words were needed. Everything we had endured, everything we had survived, was reflected in that gaze. "I've made my choice," I said softly. He smiled a small, knowing smile. "I know. It won't be easy," I admitted. "The world won't understand. My family, they'll never approve." He shook his head gently. "Then we won't ask them to. We'll live honestly, in the way we know love is meant to be. Together." And I knew he was right. Love is never simple. Love is never convenient. Love demands courage, patience, and honesty. And ours, our strange, quiet, impossible love, had survived doubt, judgment, fear, and distance. I took his hand, feeling the warmth of his palm, the steady strength that had held me through every storm. "I choose you," I whispered. "Every day, every moment. I will choose you no matter what." He leaned closer, resting his forehead against mine. "And I will choose you, always." The world outside could whisper, could scold, could try to pull us apart. But in that moment, nothing mattered except this. Two hearts, one choice, and a love that refused to be broken. We didn't need approval. We didn't need permission. All we needed was each other. And in that truth, we found freedom. Because some loves are not meant to fit the world. They are meant to survive it. And we had survived. We had chosen each other. And that was enough.